Hello, thank you for watching Shrimp City. Today I'm going to go through how to set up a cherry shrimp tank. We're going to go through all of the substrate that's needed, all of the equipment inside the tank, the filtration, the plants, the mosses. We're going to go through everything, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to set up a tank to look like mine. So first things first, obviously we need to start with an empty tank. And we need to add some substrate in. The type of substrate that we use for Neocardinia tank is inert substrate. So we want something that's not going to buffer the water or affect the chemistry. So anything like sand, gravel, all of those types of substrates are inert. I've personally been using this Marina black gravel. It's non-toxic and it's also completely inert, so it doesn't affect any of the water parameters. That's what's in both of these two tanks here. It's relatively inexpensive. You can get it from Amazon or local fish stores, but any type of inert aquarium gravel will do. Personally I chose black because the red shrimps stand out much better on the darker substrate, and you can really see the intensity of the colour. In terms of the depth of the substrate, we can see in this tank the substrate is deeper, and on this tank it's shallower. In essence, it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever is most suitable for you, realistically, because it's not offering any kind of benefit to the water. It doesn't matter how deep the substrate is. You can sometimes create a better effect with a thicker, better substrate. But also, if you don't want to use too much of it, you can use a thinner bed. Just as long as it's enough to cover the bottom of the tank, it's fine. So in terms of your substrate, you're going to want to make sure that you rinse it thoroughly, because even though it says it's dust free, it will still have dust and other chemicals on it. So you're going to want to make sure you rinse this completely through before you add it into your tank. So the next thing we need to think about is the type of filtration that we're going to be using. So on a shrimp tank, the best type of filtration is sponge filtration. So these sponge filters at the back are powered by an airline tube, which pulls the water through the sponges. These are the safest for shrimps because they can't get caught in any of the filter membranes. There's no mechanical parts on it, and also the pores on the sponge are really small, so the babies can't get sucked in either. The next thing we need to think about adding will be some driftwood. Driftwood, I use that in all my tanks mainly because it gives quite a good surface for the shrimp to graze on, for algae and biofilm, and also it looks quite good as well. And also, if you're using mosses like Java moss, it gives it somewhere, it's something for the moss to grow on and look natural. I wouldn't ever set up a shrimp tank without some kind of driftwood. The other thing I always add to my tanks is Indian almond leaves or catappa leaves. These they don't pollute the water when they break down, so they don't release any ammonia, but what they do is they release tannins into the water, and also they provide a grazing area for the shrimp for biofilm, and also they will eventually eat the leaf itself. So the next important thing to add into the tank is water. You can use tap water, dechlorinated tap water, but I would recommend, if you can, to use remineralized RO water. You'll get far better results by doing this. If you need to know how to do RO remineralized water, then watch my previous video where I explain how to do this for Neocardinia shrimp tanks. If you don't have an RODR unit, you can buy RODR water from a local fish store, as well as supermarkets. Deionized water, it's all the same thing, and you can do that and add in your salty shrimp. So once you've added your water into the tank, the next thing we need to think about is getting the aquarium cycle going. Now you'll hear the word cycling a lot in an aquarium. What that basically means is a chemical process whereby ammonia, which is generated by breaking down food and fish and shrimp waste, gets converted into nitrite, and then nitrite gets converted into nitrate, nitrate being harmless, nitrite and ammonia being poisonous. So it's important that we make sure that this biological step is completed. There is things you can add in to help boost this process, such as API Quick Start. It's worth noting that this really only works with Neocardinia tanks because the lower pH in a Cardinia tank stops this bacteria from working as efficiently. So you can add that. Obviously, if you are using API Quick Start, then you do need to add a source of ammonia into the tank for the bacteria to feed on. So you can do this one of two ways. You can either add in food, just feed the empty tank, just keep adding in food to let it break down, or you can add snails as well. And there is another way. You can add you can artificially add ammonia into the tank using it in chemical form. It's obviously a bit more dangerous doing it that way because you can quite easily add too much in and kill your cycle. The best way is to add your quick start in and some feed in and some snails, and it will, before you know it, it will be done. To also note as well, with the bacterial cycle, you will need some kind of test kit to know when your water is ready. So I use an API master test kit, and what this will do is you will get test tubes in which you'll fill it with two types of agent. So you'll have an agent and a reagent, and then depending on which colour the chart goes, depending on what you're testing for. So this is a nitrate test. As you can see, that is 0 on that test. So you'll need to make sure that you do that in order to check that your aquarium is actually cycled. What you're looking for in terms of knowing your cycle is done, you're looking for, on this test chart, you're looking for 0 parts per million ammonia, 0 parts per million nitrite, and you are looking for some nitrate because that proves that the cycle is completed. That's the last phase. So if you've still got if you've got 0 for all of these, then chances are the cycle hasn't started or hasn't finished. If you're reading some nitrate but 0 on the others, then that's a good indicator that your cycle is completed. Once your cycle is completed and you've confirmed this with your testing kits, it's recommended to do a water change. So you will take out 20% of your water and top it off again with fresh water. Basically what this will do, it will just cleanse all the nitrate out of the water that's built up during that cycling process. But once the filter itself is cycled, then you know any new waste is going to be dealt with. A really important thing that we use in shrimp tanks are these glass dishes, feeding dishes. The reason we use those is because when we feed onto those dishes, and what it does, it stops the food from falling in between the substrate. And what will happen, it will fall in between the substrate and eventually decompose and pollute the water with ammonia, and that is one of the main reasons that people fail with shrimps, is due to overfeeding. I can't stress how important it is to not overfeed shrimp. They really don't eat much at all, far less than fish, and certainly don't need to be fed every single day. What will happen if you do that, you'll eventually just pollute the water, and the ammonia and nitrite will just eventually kill them because you've overfed it. So it's really important to not overfeed, and a general rule of thumb is to put your food on a feeding tray, and whatever isn't eaten within 2 to 3 hours, take it out of the tank. Another important thing to think about and to definitely add into your shrimp tank is plants. So plants do two things. They act as a kind of filter because they will absorb the nitrates out of the water. So the more plants you have, theoretically the less often you would need to do a water change. And they do absorb ammonia and nitrite as well, not quite as much as nitrate, but they will absorb the toxins out of the water. And also they provide a secondary purpose, which is they provide a really good hiding places for baby shrimp. And you'll find that you have much better success with breeding and keeping babies if there is moss and plants for them to live in, because they can hide in it. And it also provides a really good surface area for biofilm. Biofilm being the major part of a shrimp's diet, and they get most of their nutrients and things from biofilm. So it's very important, especially for baby shrimp, that they have a good access to biofilm to be able to graze on that. So in this tank we're looking at, we've got Java moss. Java moss would probably be the most readily available moss that you can use for a shrimp tank. It's also very good, and it's relatively inexpensive. You don't need much of it either. It will grow like wildfire. If you just place some into a tank, you can tie it to your driftwood using cotton, and eventually the moss will attach to the driftwood, and you won't need to have the cotton in there anymore. Another really important step that we need to do when we add shrimp into the tank is we need to drip acclimate them. We can't just put the bag in, float them and release them like we do with fish. We need to adjust the water parameters slowly, and we do this by something called drip acclimation. So what you'll need to do, drip acclimation, is a length of airline tubing and an air stone. You don't need the air stone, but it does make it a lot easier if you've got a spare one. So what you do with this is you put the air stone on the end of one piece of your airline tubing, and then drop this into the tank. And then what you'll need to do is to take your shrimp that you've just picked up, and put them into some kind of jug, plastic or glass, it doesn't matter as long as it's clean. And then what we need to do with the other end of the airline tube is tie a very loose knot in the airline tube. So we'll start off with something like this, which is really loose, and then what we'll do, once we've started the siphon, we can then pull it tighter. So to start the siphon, we need to lower it down and we need to suck on it gently. So what you'll see now is the siphons coming out relatively quickly. So what we need to do is we need to pull the knot tighter until we've got a few drips coming out instead of a steady flow. So once we've got a couple of drips per second coming out, we can then leave the airline tube in the jug, and then we're looking for something like that where we've got a couple of drips per second coming out. And then what we'll need to do is we'll need to leave this for, depending on if they've been posted, if your shrimps have come through the post, they'll need to acclimate for an hour to 2 hours because of the temperature difference. But the easy way to test is to take your TDS pen, measure the TDS of the water that your shrimp arrived in, and your drip acclimation, measure that, and then measure the tank. Once they match, then you know that you're good to go, and then you can place them in. That means that the water parameters are the same. So guys, that concludes this video. Hopefully this has explained how to set up a shrimp tank from scratch for your cherry shrimp. If you've got any questions, leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Once again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Thanks.